Thank you for joining us for this episode of Inside Town Hall. I'm your host, Madeline Shields. This month on the program, we're talking about law enforcement in the city of Sioux Falls. And joining me for this conversation is City Councilor Kurt Sale, and his guest is Police Chief Matt Burns. Thanks for joining us for Inside Town Hall. Let's talk about, first off, you have an exciting event coming up. It's the Remote Law Enforcement Training Academy. Let's talk a little bit about that and why is it so important for that here in Sioux Falls?
Well, I can talk from the City Council's side. We've seen that there's a bottleneck, the availability in the state training for our police officers from Sioux Falls. So several years ago, they tried gently to nudge the legislature to allow that. And now that Chief Burns, in his eloquent way, has been able to achieve that. So I'll let him explain all the details, but overall, it's a very good thing for the city of Sioux Falls that we don't have open slots in the police department that can't be filled because of training. And I'll let him take it from there.
Sure. Police Chief Burns, tell us a little bit about this. How did it start and why is this so important to do this training?
Certainly. So over time, we've noticed that the available slots for training for Sioux Falls officers have just been insufficient to the number that we need to fill the available slots. We have an authorized strength of 274 officers, and every year you typically add a few officers to the budget process, but you have retirements, you have natural attrition of officers, and some of them just don't make it through the training program because it is rigorous and it takes a lot. And some people who apply to the department and start just realize it's not a good fit for them. So through all of this, it's become increasingly difficult, nearly impossible to reach that authorized strength number that we're authorized by the council. So last December, I challenged my training team to put together a proposal to send to law enforcement training in the Attorney General's office by which we could host a remote academy so we could expand the number of officers that were able to train and nearly double what we could by sending them through peer. After a lot of negotiation and back and forth and conversations and just frankly, just professional collaboration, we reached an agreement and the Attorney General has authorized us starting with the 175th session, which starts August 16th, to host indeed a remote law enforcement training academy hosted by the Sioux Falls PD, and we're very excited about that.
So how exactly will that work? And where are these officers? If it's remote, are they in other cities in the state, or how does that work?
So what remote means is just remote from peer. So they will be hosted and trained by the Sioux Falls PD, by instructors from our department, but also from instructors that come down from peer along with adjunct instructors to get the full amount of training, be it classroom, be it search and seizure, the legal piece, everything they need to know exactly as is the curriculum and peer they will have here in Sioux Falls. Okay.
Why is it beneficial? Why is it so difficult to get people to peer to do this training?
So it was really just about capacity. LET puts on 3 classes a year. And we had been getting an average of about 8 seats in each class, and that is, while it's generous, it's still based upon the growth of our city, the growth of our department, the things we mentioned before. We just could not reach our authorized strength number. So it became necessary for us to kind of think outside the box and work with LET, and I think we've got a really good program in line here.
Because that program trains all the officers throughout the state in all different towns and cities, is that correct? So we're competing with those slots?
Correct. The basic law enforcement certification course is run by Law Enforcement Training and Division of the Attorney General's office, and that has historically, since it started, been done in peer at the academy. And this is the first time that they have allowed a remote academy, and so it's kind of a test bed in a sense. But I've got the team that can pull it off. We've certainly got the facilities. We've got the program in place, and we're excited to get going.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. Obviously, you're hoping that this is successful, and then do you think it would expand? Could maybe this work? Do you have to do this more than once a year, or is it a once-a-year thing?
So we anticipate having a class, as long as we need more than 8 seats, we're able to host our own class here. That is the agreement we have with the Attorney General. And so we foresee, at least for the next 3 classes, doing this, and we'll see what works out. Part of that agreement is that there's a few seats that that law enforcement training can add additionally to the officers that we would train. We have the bandwidth in our system to hire 15, and in fact we will be hiring 15 officers on July 20th to sync up and start with that LET 175th session on August 16th.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Public Safety Training Center. This has been an ongoing facility that is in conjunction with the fire department to do training. Let's talk a little bit about where we're at with that.
Well, certainly, and I'll give you a little bit of my history. I mean, years ago when I was on the fire department, I spent 2 years as a training officer out at the current facility, and I will say it has been used. It has been abused for the years. So now that it's in the state that it's in, it's time to finish it. There's been a land acquisition done through the city. There's been preliminary plans drawn, and we're getting to the final stages of putting the plans together, which is going to be great collaboration between police, fire, and also Metro Communications available to go out there, because they're really cramped in where they have, and they need a second location, which will move their primary location to the Police Fire Training Center campus, and they'll use the current place that's down here that the county funds, that, well, actually we both fund, that for their secondary in case there's a storm or tornado or something like that. So we're getting very close to the final drafts of that. I have discussions next week with finance about the bonding to go forward, and the particulars, I trust that Chief Burns and Chief Goodrow, they've done a great job in the plans, and I'll let you talk more about that.
Sure. It looks like you guys have the whole architecture figured out. What does it entail, and how is it going to be different than what we currently have, which I think is on the airport grounds? Is that correct?
Yes, it is, and that is one of the issues we have going forward. Is just reliable access to that training center out there as well, and the problems that issues that the counselor has mentioned. It's tired. The newest building out there that we use for training is 25 years old, and frankly, it wouldn't meet the design standards of today as far as runoff and things like this. So it's time for a new center. We've acquired or have a process in place to acquire the land pending bond approval, and we're down to the final schematic design with the architects that were retained for the project. It's an amazing facility, and it's going to allow us to train Sioux Falls firefighters, Sioux Falls police officers in ways and to training standards that we've never been able to do before. The design encapsulates a city scene where you have buildings that actually replicate, not exactly, but that are like buildings that you would see in Sioux Falls, and that firefighters and police officers would encounter on the calls for service that we go on. And it's a dual use. The firemen may use the building in a burn scenario because they'll have gas piped in there to be able to extinguish a fire, and then once that is out, it's not on fire anymore, and then the police officers can use it for a dual use scenario, whether that's an active shooter or a hostage situation or any number of very realistic police scenarios that we see right here in Sioux Falls. So the utility and what we're able to do out there is truly next generation.
According to my notes, it says there's a maze house. Why is it so important to have that kind of training for officers?
Well, anytime that you can have a building and have it modular in a way so you can set it up for different type scenarios, so officers and firefighters aren't seeing the same thing every time, it just enhances the level of training. It makes them think differently. It makes them attack the problem in a different way. And frankly, every house in Sioux Falls is built a little bit differently. So it just brings a true realism to the training environment that's frankly irreplaceable without something like that in place.
The current facility has fire training had movable walls for a long time, and they got so tired they couldn't move them around. And if you're training the same scenario all the time, you kind of get a repetition. Turn right, here's a couch, turn left, we know what's going on. So the ability to do that, to confuse people and put them in situations where they get confused at training and not confused in a real situation, that's invaluable. I'll give you a little tidbit about the current fire training center that's out there. Years ago when that was coming about, the city was on the cusp of applying for a grant and found out on a Friday they were late. They had to have it in on Friday. So they made a few phone calls to Denver where the federal grant writing was, and they said, okay, if you get it here Monday, we'll take it. So a couple of city employees got on a plane and flew out to Denver to personally deliver the grant application. Otherwise, that first one would have never happened at the time that it happened. So there's a long history with getting it done. This one is put a lot of time into, a lot of forethought, and it's going to be done right. And it's going to be a facility that is going to not only be regionally looked at as great, it's going to be looked at across the country. When
do you foresee that this is construction will begin, and when may it be finished?
Well, a lot of it depends on the bonding, which we're just getting, like I say, I have a meeting next week with finance to talk about the bonding and the process that they're going to go through and when they hope to have it done. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the fire needs it done fairly soon so they can keep their accreditation, and the fire station is going to come, and then the fire training center is going to come right after that.
So with the bonding timeline, it looks like that'll happen over the next a month or so is when that'll be presented to council. And so that puts us on a schedule to likely begin construction in earnest in the spring of next year of 2021 with an anticipated completion date in 2022. So we will be continue to use the facilities we have for a time being, but in all the while preparing for that training center. And that training center is going to encapsulate also feature a 15-lane 50-yard police shooting range, as well as an emergency vehicle operations track, so that not only police officers but fire can train on that track with some of their equipment as well.
When you talk about the training center, is it like one big building or is it multiple structures? How's it going to look?
So there will be a training building, which you would host training, and it has room for up to 18 fire cadets and 18 police officers. But inside that building, you would have various rooms to host that training. But more than one half of that building would actually be the public safety answering point, which is the PSAP or 911 center. So that is the biggest building out there. And then the other structures would be the range, would be the fire burn towers, would be a storage building with a number of bays in it. So the center is the land and all the buildings on the property, but the actually training building is probably the biggest feature of it.
Okay, well, that's exciting news. As a reporter 30 years ago, they took the media into that old training center there, and I think it was crazy to go into a burning building as a guest. They suited you up to do that. Do you see any opportunity for the public at all to ever do anything like that?
Absolutely. I think that there's certainly opportunities for public meetings out there. There's going to be a space for a potential emergency operations center to be hosted if that would be necessary in that space. And there's going to be plenty of times where we could be able to bring the public out and have a media event and show them exactly this is the level of training that your public safety officers and firemen get in Sioux Falls. This is what they're doing to help keep you safe. Pretend that this building is a schoolhouse at this time. And so then we run a scenario like it's a school building or a hospital or a home. So when you have modularity built into the system and the structures, then you can run a variety of training scenarios, and that benefits everyone in our community.
When the design of this, or when the conception of this was happening, where did you learn about it? Do other cities have something similar like this?
There's a lot of cities that have similar things like this, but as they've done their due diligence throughout the years, you take the best parts of all of these little plans and put it together with you. And I'll let you speak more specifically about the firm that you're using, but they've done a great job with the plans that I've seen.
So we contracted with an architectural firm, WSKF Architects out of Kansas City, and another gentleman who is a retired firefighter. And he has lots of experience, plus he's got an architectural degree, and he's helped build and design these centers all over the world, frankly. And his name is Tommy Abercrombie, and he'll be presenting to council soon on this project, and he's been here before. But they just bring a wealth of experience and real-world experience in being able to design and build these centers for a variety of different municipalities and county agencies across this country and elsewhere. So truly, it's an impressive group. They know their business, and what they've prepared for us is very impressive.
Well, I think that component that they have experience and they know from being in law enforcement or in firefighting that they know what needs to be done for training. Is that a bonus, do you see?
It absolutely is. There's no replacement for that experience to know what the expectations of the job are, what the taskings are, and be able to then design a plan that fits a real world environment.
Sure. Well, I'm going to skip around here a little bit, and let's talk about the Southwest Report to Work Station. Why is it important to have another police station in a different part of Sioux Falls that is separate from the one downtown?
Well, from the council standpoint and my standpoint, we have grown so large that we have to look at new solutions to that logistically on where we've done that for years with fire stations. They do that with the ambulances stationed around town, as you see, and the police department has, in my opinion, has grown to the fact that they need to look logistically on where they can best serve the citizens and how they can get there, what their response times are, and how they can best take care of their officers so they're not spending all their time driving back and forth to one central location. Because when they clock in for work, it'd be nice to have them right there in the area they have. The specifics of what happened out there, Chief Burns has acquired the land, and I'll let him talk about the rest of that.
Sure.
So really this began actually several years ago when I became chief. We began to look and assess the property that we had and the rate that we're growing and the prospective growth for the future. And it was a pretty short equation to tell me that we were going to soon run out of space at the law enforcement center and we need to look elsewhere. So I began that process. There was a space needs analysis done of our current facility, and then that progressed to a fire station location study, which included a piece which talked about where is the best place in Sioux Falls to expand the police department as far as a report to work station. That report back came and told us pretty much what we expected it to say, that was the southwest part of town. The transit times between the current law enforcement center and southwest were the greatest if an officer had to bring in evidence or come in for an administrative reason. And so we immediately, upon publish of that study, shared it with the council, sought their support, and got it. And so then, since then, we've been looking for the right space. Well, we found an incredible building that is currently being used by Paramedics Plus and Patient Care EMS now. And so we'll be taking over the lease of that building July 1st and begin a transformation of inside. It doesn't take a great deal of work, but there's some necessary work to transform that into an appropriate public safety space with locker rooms and things like that. So the need for that was to free up space at the current law enforcement center. With the growth of our department over the years, we have a distinct lack of parking space, locker room space, and frankly, office space. But it's just a function of our growth and the FTEs we've added to support the growth of the city. So by building it southwest, you'll have a remote evidence facility there that is secure, that our crime lab personnel can go down and get evidence out of. But those officers, when they're on their calls, they don't have to drive all the way in to the current law enforcement center to take in evidence to secure it to an evidentiary standard. They can do it right there. And when they report from duty, they drive right from their residence to that report to work location, get their shift briefing, and then they're out into their districts and the areas that they patrol. So it's just an efficiency standard, and frankly, it's time.
Will this be a facility where the public will have to do any business there, or will they continue to do that at the public safety building downtown?
So the public side will still be at the law enforcement center downtown. Okay. As envisioned right now, that this will not have a front desk area. It is just simply a report to work location as designed.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, we're going to talk about police body cam discussion, and then we're also going to hear about the resource officers. We'll be back in just a moment.
Would you drive at 60 miles per hour the length of a football field while blindfolded? Have you driven at 60 miles per hour and checked a text message?
If you said yes to the second question, then you're guilty of the first question too. By taking just a few moments to look at your phone to see who's calling while traveling 60 miles an hour, you will cover more than 100 yards while looking at your phone.
Save a life.
Save it for later.
Brought to you by the City of Sioux Falls.
Welcome back to Inside Town Hall, where we are visiting with City Councilor Kurt Sale, and his guest is Police Chief Matt Burns. Thanks for being here. Let's talk about the community resource officers. There are different job descriptions or duties for resource officers. What do they do for the police department?
So for many years, and frankly since 1996, we've had a school resource officer program, and that's up to 14 officers and 2 supervisors, which are assigned 2 SROs each to the high schools and an SRO each to the middle schools. And then each of those SROs have responsibility for certain elementary schools. So if there's a call at a certain elementary school, that's assigned to the officer who has a responsibility for it. And then About 4 years ago, we've had crime prevention officers for several years in the police department, but we decided it was time to reimagine that section, and we actually created and turned them into community resource officers. We started out with 2. They still do the crime prevention functions, but it's actually much more than that now. They're charged with engaging community members for more outreach, to more programming as far as not only with kids, but also adults, and reaching out to the ethnic communities in our and minority communities in our city, just to build that conversation, to build relationships so that we have less ground to cover if there's an issue. And so they feel more comfortable coming to the police department and making reports. And because we truly are the police department for every citizen and resident in our city, and we want them to feel that way too.
Okay. During the break, we talked a little bit about how you have met with the superintendent of schools, the new superintendent. How does it look like going back into school this fall? Is there any changes that you can see?
Well, they're talking about that at the school district level, and so in our meeting last week with Dr. Stavum, it was basically an introductory meeting. That was the first time that we got to meet her, and I can tell you that she is a big supporter of school resource officers. She sees the value in it, and we had a very productive discussion about what that program has truly meant, not only to our department, but to the school district, IPC, and the community, because each school resource officer in their school is a mini community policing program, and that's truly how we see it, because every day those SROs are building relationships not only with students, which is incredibly important, but with staff, with teachers, administrators, to truly have a relationship and an environment that is second to none. And we are so proud of our school resource officer program, and it's been very successful. And I think the community sees the value in that every day.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about the importance that you see with these community resource officers on the city level, as our city becomes more diverse? And having that relationship with new Americans, with the police department.
Certainly. As you said, our city is becoming more and more diverse. It takes more and more expertise in certain areas to deal with it. Nobody can be an expert in all the fields. So as the community resources officers and frankly other parts of the city government reach out and deal with the minority communities or any communities, it's very important to bring them in and let them know what's going on with the city. Also, there's always seems to be an issue as you move to a new city. Even if I was to move to Box Elder, they have different rules that you might have to follow to allow them to know that on a level that's non-confrontational. That's very important, because too late sometimes the police officers are called at the last minute when something's going wrong. It's nice to be out in front of that, and that's what they've done a very nice job of. They've done it there. They also do a great job with the neighborhood watch program that they've brought forward, so the neighborhoods can get together, whether any part of town that can have a neighborhood watch to do that helps us in the long run for the city.
Well, and I've had the opportunity to see firsthand how the community resource officers work with children living in poverty. And why do you think that is so important, to do those events with children in a vulnerable population?
So it's the same premise why we value the school resource officers so much, is when you reach the youth of your community and build a rapport with them, and they see you as somebody that's there to help. They see you and your department as the solution to a problem, and not something to be feared or think that that's something that's scary. Then you've truly made a connection for life, and that's why you reach out to the youth, because at the end of the day, that's our job, is to serve and protect, and it starts with the children.
Okay, let's talk about the Community Ambassador Program. What exactly is that?
So in 2018, that's another program that we started, and that is an extension of our Community Resource Officer Program. So we actually looked into some of the minority communities and of Sioux Falls and communities of color, and said, we want to find leaders in these communities. We want to find persons of influence, persons who have a profile in these communities, and bring them in closer to us and build a relationship and put them through specific training. And they're all volunteers. And so that we can kind of demystify our department, not only to these ambassadors, but then they can take that message and help us spread that message out to these communities. And we have, I think there's 15 community ambassadors that we have working with us now. And we put them through an entire program to show them the different facets of our department, not unlike our other programs that we have. And so it just breaks down the mystery right? And because there's many folks in the communities that we serve that the country they came from, or the area they came from, at a minimum, the law enforcement or the government there might have been corrupt to outright abusive. And so they might come to our country with a totally misaligned view of what law enforcement is in this country. And so that's our job, to reach out and help them to understand. No, we're a professional organization that has their best interests at heart. We're part of a community here, and it is our job to help them understand that we're there to promote their safety as well.
So if someone wants to get involved in that program, how do they do that? Do you do specific trainings like certain times a year?
Yeah, we will certainly add to that program. We understand in any program you may have a certain amount of turnover because folks are very, very busy in their lives. And so just please contact our community resource officers and contact the department. We'd be happy to talk to you about adding that.
Some of the things that the community ambassador members, they help assist police too as well. So they're not just, they are a liaison, but they're also there to help facilitate conversations, like with the Cinco de Mayo, the Pride Fest, and the National Night Out. Why is that so important? And before this program started, did you see some challenges?
Well, there's challenges for every law enforcement agency to make sure that they're communicating with all aspects of their community and all groups, and that's something that's very important. As we know, even in our own family lives, there's hardly anything more important than good communication, and certainly in our professional lives. And so that's not an easy thing to do, especially when there may be language differences. So it's key to have people that you can relate to that speaks a different language, so that you make sure that you're not missing someone out there. But it's an ongoing challenge. There's a multitude of languages spoken in our city, and certainly we see that in our school district. So there's much more work yet to do, but it's worth every bit of effort.
Mm-hmm. At the city council level, do you see all of these positive changes? Are you hearing back from citizens in the community?
Well, I've certainly heard a lot lately about our police department and the police officers across the country. They've been in the news a lot lately. I have consistently heard lately about how good our police officers are. That's one of the reasons I wanted to invite Chief Burns to this discussion today. There are always going to be segments that are not satisfied unless things are perfect. We have a very good police department here in Sioux Falls. They reach out to the community. When I see young people interacting with the police department, it's always in a positive thing, whether it's National Night Out or whether it be a parade or whatever. Those are positive reinforcements. They've done a great job with the downtown Sioux Falls and trying to patrol that. They do great jobs on the bike trail. They do great jobs in community outreach. I think we have an excellent police department here, and that's what I hear from the community. Rarely will I hear somebody that has a complaint about something, but it's always something about they took too big a left-hand turn, or they didn't have a good haircut, or it's little things like that that come to me as a city councilor. So that's why I wanted to have Chief Burns here, so he could explain all these other positive things that don't get the headlines.
Absolutely. We have just a minute left to talk about some body cam. There have been lots of questions about if Sioux Falls Police use body cams. Can you explain to us what is the protocol?
Yes, so over the past several years, we went through an entire series of testing different body camera systems to make sure that we wanted to get the one that fit our needs the best, but it was also reliable and that had a good product, because basically that's a product for the state's attorney's office and for prosecutors to use. And so we settled on a system. We bought 30 body cameras at the same time that we replaced every dashboard camera in our patrol vehicles. So over the past about year and a half, we've been using those 30 body cameras, and I've told the community and told the council that my priority for those was to have them on bike patrol officers, on foot patrol officers. We put them on our SROs in our schools, and for our motor officers on our motorcycles who don't have any camera platform. And so it's actually worked very well. So we are prepared at this time, based upon that testing, based upon that use and confidence in that system, to have a very strong conversation this budget season about purchasing those for the rest of our uniformed staff. The cameras themselves aren't the expensive part, it's the storage. And so our first contract was for 5 years, and you would see something like that again in a pattern, but that's the expensive part. We believe it's worth the investment. We believe that the citizens and the residents of our city worth the investment, and we'll make our pitch to the council.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining us for this episode of Inside Town Hall. That's our time for this month's episode. If you have any questions or concerns, or you're just looking for news on what's going on in the city, you can go to siouxfalls.org. Thanks for watching.